Hello and welcome to the section on Power Automate. In this video, we're going to be continuing with Project 1 and we're going to be building our ticketing system. In the first video, we did our introduction of the project and we also set up our SharePoint site. So in this section, we need to make sure that your SharePoint site is already set up and then we'll be creating our first trigger. So our first trigger will check for any emails in our inbox that have a subject of support, and based on that, it will perform a number of actions. So let's scroll down. If we go through to our first trigger, we can see over here we've got trigger 1. And the first action that it's going to be doing is going to be monitoring our inbox for any incoming emails that have a subject of support. So the action that that's going to be performing is new email arrives. And this is an action provided by Power Automate, and it's currently on version 3. If you're watching this video at a later date, it might be on a different version. Next, we're going to be using Compose to store the from address, and this from address is the email address of the person who sent us the ticket. Number 3, we're going to be using Compose to store the ticket number, and we're going to be creating the ticket number using 3 different functions. So the first function that we'll be using is concat, and concat is a function that is used to join multiple strings. So the first string that we're going to be having is the date, which is going to be generated by the UCT now, and it's going to be in the format of YYYY minus MM minus DD. The next string is going to be a character of a minus sign, and the third string is going to be a random number between 1000 and 9999. So it's going to be a 4-digit character or 4-digit string. The full function is going to be in the format of concat, UCT now, then your format of your date, then your character to separate the two strings, in this case a minus sign, and then the random function to generate the 4-digit character or the 4-digit number. If we look at the next step, we're going to be using Compose again, and Compose is going to be used to store the body, and this is going to be the body of the email that we received in step 1. Step 5, we're going to be using create item, and create item is going to create our list item in our SharePoint site that we created in our previous video. If we look at step 6, we're going to be using Compose again, and Compose will be used to get the item URL. So it will be linking to our item that we created, which is the item in step 5. Step 7, we'll be using get user profile, and this will be used to get the user's profile information, which we require for our email that we'll be sending them. Currently, we only have their email address, but from the email address, we can generate their display name or their first name or surname, department, or whatever other information is stored in Active Directory. If we look at step 8, we'll be sending an email, and this is using send an email action, and currently this is on version 2. So the email that we'll be sending the user will be automatically sent, and it will include the user's display name. It will include the unique number, which is automatically generated in step 3, and it will also have a link to the item that we created. So this will be point number 6. Great, so let's go over to our Power Automate, and if we click on New Flow, you can see over here we have an option to create automated flows. And if you remember in the first video that we did, we mentioned that automated flows happen automatically, whereas instant flows occur by a user action, so clicking on a button, for example. Let's click the automated flow because this is going to be automated. It's going to be monitoring our inbox. And if we click automated flow, it gives us an option for a name. And I will call this trigger 1. And it's a check email. Make sure you give it a descriptive name. Maybe you can be more descriptive than I am, but that is the name that I'm giving it now. And the action that this trigger is going to be performing is new email arrives. So we can type over here new email. And over here, you can see there's a number of actions that we can perform, but I'll be selecting the first one, which is when a new email arrives. And as I mentioned, this is version 3. If you want to get more information, you can hover over the I button. And this will give you some information on what the action performs. Let's select that and click on create. This will create our flow. And over here, you can see we have our action over here, or our trigger. If we click on Show Advanced Options, you can see we have a number of different fields that we can enter. So the first field that I'm going to enter over here is my email address. If you're using a different email address, I guess you won't be using my email address. You can just type that in here and it will check that specific email address that you've entered. And then the other criteria that we need to be monitoring is the subject, and we will be using the subject of support. Again, you could use any subject that you want, but I'll be filtering all emails based on the subject of support. We'll be changing this in a later video, but for now, this will be fine. And let's click on the next step. So the next step that we're going to be doing is using Compose. And if you type Compose, you can see we have Compose. And again, you can click on the eye, and this will give you some information on what this component does. So for Compose, we will just be using it to store the information, and the information that we'll be storing is dynamic information. So if you click on Add Dynamic Content, this window on the right-hand side will pop out, and you can see over here we have the from. So this is the mailbox owner and the sender of the message. So the person who has sent us our email. So the person who is logging the ticket. It's also important to click on these three dots and give Compose a descriptive name. We will give this a name of Compose minus from, and we will click on next step. And the next step that we will be doing is creating our ticket number. So again, we will be using Compose to store this information. And if we type Compose, we can click on Compose data, and in the input, we need to add our function. So instead of using dynamic content, we need to click on expression, and to add a function, we can add in the expression that we want to use, and in this case it's concat, open close brackets, and in the open close brackets we're going to add our function to get the date, and that is UTC now, and the format that we're going to be giving that date is YYYY minus MM minus DD. So that is the year, so 2020 minus month, and the month will be the 12th month of the year, and the day will be the current day. Let's go on to our next string that we're going to be adding here, and we can type space, quotation marks, and in the quotation marks we can type minus. Again, you could use any other separator that you want. I just want to use minus, so I will be adding that. And then again, we're going to add a comma, and here we're going to be adding our random number. So we're going to be using the function of rand, open close brackets, and inside the brackets, we're going to be adding two numbers. So the starting number and the ending number. So our random number will be between these two numbers. So between 1000 and 9999. Again, you could add any number that you want here. So you could say between 1 and 10, but I would like mine to be 4 digits. So I'm using 1000 and 9999. If we click on OK, that will add that function to our Compose. And let's click on New. So if we add a new step, and the next step will be for our body of our email, and we will type again Compose, and we can select Compose data, and in the input we're going to be adding dynamic information. And if we scroll down, you can see over here we have body, and this is the body of our email. Before we move forward, let's just rename these Compose to the first one over here to Compose minus ticket minus NO for our ticket number, and the one we just created, we're going to rename that as well to Compose minus body. It's important to give these descriptive names, because as we move on with our application and we're adding more steps, it might get difficult to identify them. Let's click on next step, and this step will be to create our item in SharePoint. So if we type in the search box, we can type create item, So we want to be using SharePoint, so let's click on SharePoint, and over here you can see all of the functions, all of the actions that we have for SharePoint. So we want to be using create item, and if we click on create item, let's just give it a name. So create item, and we will be calling that ticket. So in the create item, you have two fields that you need to enter. So you've got the site address and the list name. So if we click on the drop down, it will give you a list of all your SharePoint sites. So this is the SharePoint site that I want to use. If you haven't used this before, you can select an option to enter a custom value because the SharePoint site might not be listed here. So you can select enter custom value. And when you do that, we can go over to our SharePoint site and we can select the site URL and we can copy that and we can paste this into our bar over here. So if we click out there, you can see it saves it, but now we have to enter the list that we're going to be using to create our item in, and this is going to be our tickets list. If we click on show advanced options, we got some more options that we can add. The first option that we're adding is our ticket number. And these items over here that we're getting, they're coming from our list in SharePoint. So if we go back to SharePoint, you can see over here we have a column for ticket number, email address, message, status, comment, assigned to, and all the other columns that we would have in our SharePoint list. So if we go back to our flow, you can see over here the first one is our ticket number. And for the ticket number, we're going to be using the compose function that we used for ticket number. So if we scroll down over here, we can see we've got an option for ticket number, and that is compose ticket number. If we select that, we'll add it to our form. And if we hover our mouse over it, you can see over here, it says outputs compose underscore ticket number, and that is what we want. The email address claims is the email address of the user. What we need to do is click on enter custom value. And again, the pop-up will pop out on the right-hand side of the screen, and we can scroll down to our compose value that we created, which is compose from. And if we select that, this will be the from address of the user. And then for the message, we want to use the body of the email. So if we click over here and we go to the dynamic content, we can scroll down and we can get the compose body. And then we have the status, and the status value when you're creating a new ticket, it will be set to new. You could set this as a different value. So you could set it as cancel, closed, in progress, new, or pending. But for me to set it to new makes sense, so I'll leave it as new. And then we can add a comment. This comment can either be dynamic or static. I'm just going to add, for all new emails that come through, I'm going to add a comment of new email. Great, then the assign to will be empty because we're not going to be assigning it to anyone. This will be done by the team who's managing these tickets. But if you wanted to assign it to someone, you could add a dynamic name or you could add a static name. But as mentioned, I'm going to leave that as blank. When this ticket is created in SharePoint, it's going to have the ticket number, it's going to have the email address, and it's going to have the message, which is the body of the email. And it's going to have a status of new, and it's going to have a comment of new ticket. Great, let's click on next step. And the next step will be to get the URL of this item that we've created. So if we type over here compose, we can select the compose and we can rename it to get -get item. And the value that we'll be storing over here is the URL of the item that we've just created. So if we scroll down under our dynamic content, and we need to select link to item. So if you just have a look at all the variables that you have over here, and these are all coming from our SharePoint list, and they relate to this item that we've just created. So I'll select link to item, and that will be a link or a URL to the item that we've just created. So the next step is to get the user information or get the user profile. So if we click on next step and we can type in the search box, get user profile. And if we scroll down, we can see over here there's an action for get user profile, and it's on version 2, and it's using Office 365 user information. Again, you can click on the button or the icon over here, the information icon, and you can get more information. Let's select the get user profile, and we can also give this a name. So if we rename this, get user profile, user name. And if we click over here under user UPN, we can scroll down, and the value that we're going to be adding there is the email address, so the from address. So if we scroll all the way down, you can see over here we have a from. So this is the email address of the user who has logged the ticket. Great, let's click on next, and the next step will be to create an email. And if we type over here send email, you've got a number of actions that you can choose, and we will be using send an email, and it's on version 2. So if you click on that, you can see over here we have an option for to, subject and body. So in to, we're going to use some dynamic content. So if you say add dynamic content, and on the pop-up that pops up, you can scroll all the way down, and we can say compose from. So the from is the person that sent us the email. We're going to be replying to them or sending them an email, and the subject will be support space. And we're also going to be using some dynamic content. And if we scroll all the way down and we go to our compose and select the ticket number. So this will add the support and ticket number in the subject. And then for the body, we could type whatever we want here, but I want to make this as an HTML body. The reason for that is I want to add a hyperlink. When they click on it, it will open up the SharePoint site. So what I've done, I've created a basic HTML page, and this is what the email will look like. It will have an image at the top. It will have a heading at the top here saying dear, and enter display name will be the user's name, and then some text that we will be sending them, and then their ticket number. So this will be replaced with some dynamic content, and it will be their ticket number that they have just created. Then more dynamic content will be this button. So when they click on this button, it will redirect them to the item that they've just created. I'm not going to go into too much detail on the HTML formatting, but I'll include a link to the GitHub repository that I've created, and you can see this is the information. You can change this as you need it, and or use how I have used it on GitHub. So let's copy this text, and if we go back to Power Automate, we have the option over here to select Code View, and if we click on Code View, we can remove the text that's currently there, and we can paste our text that we've copied. Great, so this pastes all of our HTML code. You can see it's got some styling. Unfortunately, you can only use inline styling, and this has some limitations. But if we go all the way down, and if we go to the body of the HTML, we can see over here we've got a table called container, and the first row in our table is the image. And let's go down, and you can see over here H1 dear, and this display name needs to be dynamic. So where it says enter display name, we can remove that. So you can see over here, get user profile version 2 username. This is getting all of the user attributes based on the email address that we added. So if we scroll up, so you can see it's getting it from here. Let's scroll back down, and you could add the city, you could add the company, you can add the department, display name, given name, ID, interests, and so forth. So whatever information is added on that user's profile in Azure Active Directory will be displayed over here. I don't have any information for this user except for the display name. So if we click on display name and we scroll up, you can see now we have on heading 1, we'll have dear display name. So whatever that user's name is will be displayed in this text over here. If we scroll down, you can see over here we have some text. So it says, please note that the reference number for your ticket is, And in that tag of strong, we can remove the text and we can scroll down, and this is going to be the text of our ticket number. So we can scroll all the way down and we can look for output ticket number. And you can see over here, this is going to be the ticket number. Next, we need to add a link for the item that we created. So in the href, you can see over here, there's some stars. So if we remove the stars, and we can go to our dynamic content, and we can look for the item link, which we created using compose get item. So if we scroll down, and you can see over here, we have compose get item. Let's select that. And now that dynamic content has been added. Let's click on that quickly and say save. And if we just scroll up and see over here, the first step, we're looking for all emails that come in based on the criteria that we've entered. The next step that we're doing, we using compose to store the from email address. Then we using compose to store the ticket number that we're creating dynamically. And then we're using compose to store the body of the email. Then we're creating the item based on this information from the compose. And next step, we're using compose to get the item. So the item that we've created, we're getting the URL. Then we're using get use profile version 2 to get the user's information. And we're storing that information as well as the ticket number, the from, the body, and the link to the item in the email that we're going to send our users. So great, let's test that out and see how it works. So if we click on test, and we've got an option to manually test. And if we say test, so I'm currently logged in with my admin account, so I can't test it on my email. I'm not going to send myself an email. So I have to open this up in another browser, and I'm going to do it in incognito. So if I can use another email account, and you can see over here, I'm logged in with test2. So this is a different email account, and I'm going to say new message, and I'm going to type in over here admin. And then for the subjects, I'm going to say support. If you used a different formatting, you can say something else. And then over here, I can say, dear support, please can you create So that is my message to support. So I'm asking them to create a new SharePoint site. This can just be some fictitious information, so whatever you want to type. And then I'll say regards test 2. Great, and then if we send, this will go into my inbox. You can hear it beeping. So if I minimize this, and if I go to my admin inbox, you can see here is the email that's come through. Dear support, please can you create a new SharePoint site? Regards test 2. So great, if we go over to our second mailbox of test 2 in the incognito mode, so if we go to the incognito tab, you can see over here we've received an email and it's got a title of support and it's got the date and a unique number. And if we open it up, you can see over here it's got to me and it says dear test 2 and it's got the message that we entered over here and it's saying my ticket number is 2020 1219 and it's 1770. So this number over here is our unique number, and this is the date that we created in Power Automate for formatting. If we look underneath here, you can see, please click on My Ticket button. This is the My Ticket button over here, and it's got the name over here from the support team. So if we click on this button over here, it will open in a new tab, and you can see over here, this is the list in the SharePoint site. So it's got the ticket number, it's got the email address. So this is my email address. It's showing my name, but you could change that to display the email address. It's got the message. So this is the email that I sent from test 2. Dear support, please can you create a new SharePoint site regards test 2. The status is set to new and the comment, new ticket. So this is all the information that we created and we asked Power Automate to create. If we minimize this and we go over to SharePoint, you can see over here we can refresh. And you can see over here our ticket number that we have, which is 2020 1219-1770. And you can see over here the email address that we have over here is test2, and the status of the ticket is set to new, and it's not assigned to anyone yet. And if we click on view comment, you can see over here it's got the comment of what we specified in Power Automate. So that brings step number 2 to an end. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.